Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Strategic Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. Today, we are diving into the AI-infused world of crisis management with Liza Adams, the mind behind GrowthPath.net and a maven of marrying AI with strategic marketing. She's here to reveal how you can leverage AI for bulletproof crisis planning, to address ethical quandaries, and to talk about the need for transparent communication. From scenario simulations to mitigating media meltdowns, Liza's insights are your ticket to turning potential chaos into your strategic advantage. And don't forget to check out the most recent issue of the Strategy First newsletter on StrategyCast.com. Just like this episode, it's full of inspiration and a ton of ideas that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I am so excited to have Liza Adams join the show again. I mean, this is quite an ongoing encore appearance. Welcome.
Thank you, Lori. I'm equally excited to be here. I've always loved being on your show.
Well, you're one of my go-to experts. And today we're going to be diving into being resilient in a climate where AI is really changing the need for crisis management. I mean, it's happening left and right. Before we get there, though, tell us a little bit more about you and your story.
Okay, well, story-wise, AI is one of those things that I'm now leaning into more than ever. Not because I'm passionate about it, right? But it elevates what I'm passionate about. It elevates my work, and it also elevates my purpose. And just to tell you just a little bit about that, I love elevating the strategic value of marketing.
And you're with that.
So AI helps us with that. I also love working with companies that have a purpose more than just making money. And I think AI, when used responsibly, allows us to elevate that. And then last but not least, I love changing the way we work and live. And again, if we use it responsibly, AI could work in our favor and it benefits humanity rather than harms it. So like my three concentric circles of passion, purpose, and work are coming together, and it's all being enabled by AI. So I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm a fractional CMO right now. I am an AI advisor to a number of companies, and I help inspire people what's possible with AI.
Well, and one of the major reasons that we chose to talk about crisis management today is the unethical use of AI and its effect on CEOs, the C-suite, CMOs, everyone really needing to make strong planning decisions, strategic decisions on what to do in case of X. And we're going to dive into that. What are some of the things that you're hearing in a lot of your consultancy and a lot of the workshops that you're giving? How often is crisis comms even asked about?
Not at all.
Yeah.
which is a little bit sad, right? Because, as I tell people, the worst time to think about learning how to fix a leak in the roof is when it rains or during a downpour, right? We know it's going to rain. We know it's going to have we're going to have a downpour. But if we wait, that's just the worst possible time to think about it, right? And same thing with crisis management. The worst time to think about managing a crisis is on the day of the crisis.
That's right. I love what you just said because I've got some numbers to back that up, by the way.
Oh, you do? Okay, let's hear it.
So I ran some studies from Deloitte and PwC, and 69% of businesses have experienced a crisis. 30% of them have a crisis comms or have a crisis team in place, but only 32% of them pre-plan. So that's that number's washed out, right? And 45% say they don't have, they might have a crisis like thought process, but 45% say they don't actually have it on paper. So they think, okay, if this happens, I'm going to do this, but it's not in a plan, it's not written, nothing like that. Those are staggering numbers, especially given COVID.
Yeah. COVID is one thing, and
Yeah.
AI further increases the need for us to be proactive about this, right? I also tell people that just as AI is being used by good people, as adoption increases, the number of bad actors will use AI, right? Because we talk about AI being a tool, right? Much like a hammer can be used to build, it can be used to destroy.
Right.
Thing with AI. So more people using it, the higher the probability of good people and bad people using it, right? So, and on top of that, we don't know exactly how AI works. There aren't that many regulations around AI. We were relying on social movements for the most part to regulate AI, right? The technology companies are trying their best to help, ensure that it benefits humanity rather than harms it. But there are so many unknowns. And when there are so many unknowns, I think this is the time where we need to lean in proactively on crisis management, educating the market, having a risk assessment plan, and kind of going through the motions of what would happen if a crisis happened.
Scenario planning.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the ways that AI is used unethically. And one of the areas that I'm very interested in and hearing your insights on are the deep fakes and what people are doing there to basically make fake information from someone's name and likeness.
Yeah. This year, especially in the United States, is going to be a very interesting year, given that it is an election year. And as I walk around the neighborhood, you and I, Lori, we're in tech. We work with a lot of technology-enabled businesses or technology businesses, and we live and breathe AI every day, and we're aware of it, right? The average human being on this planet does not know. Right? I walk around my neighborhood and I'm looking at all the houses and all my neighbors. I'm like, okay, he doesn't know anything about AI or she doesn't, right? And that poses a pretty big challenge this election year and beyond, right? Because people will believe what we see, right? Yeah.
And imagine your business having a new product launch and an AI tool responding to that new product launch with fake information. I mean, so the big media landscape is one thing, but how someone, a competitor, an ex-employee who doesn't like you, that's what they could do ultimately to ruin a product launch.
Yeah. The deep fakes, those get the headlines, right? But I think about the 8 ethical principles of AI. And I think we need to be very cognizant of them. There's been a lot of chatter about AI innovation and advancements, right? But there's a disproportionately smaller amount of chatter around the ethical use of AI. So you know how when we remember the planets, we say, my very economical mother just served us 9 pies, right? That's how you remember the planets.
Never eat breaded wheat,
Yeah, something like that. I go with the friendly tigers prefer apples. Some seek sweet honey. That's how I remember the 8 responsible AI principles, right? So fairness, transparency, privacy, accountability, sustainability, safety, social well-being, and human oversight.
Right.
So that's your friendly tigers thing, right? But if we could think about each one of those things,
exactly,
create some education around them, come up with some real life examples, in our businesses of how each one of those things could potentially impact our business, our employees, our community, and beyond. And then think about a crisis management plan in
Right.
something. It doesn't have to be like super comprehensive, but having the thought process for how to handle things and how to, mitigate some of these risks will be super important to us.
I agree. And for those, the 30% of businesses out there that do have the crisis comms plan in place, let's say that 5 times fast, to augment it with those 8 scenario plan around those 8 components, I think is very, very important. So we've talked about deep fakes. We've talked a little bit about disinformation campaigns, and we're seeing that. I mean, they really tie hand in hand. A lot of that on social media. I mean, poor Taylor Swift. I mean, I love her, but poor Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I mean, it's happening left and right with them, but it's very purposeful. People are doing it to hurt people, which is the unethical side of all of this. Impersonation and fraud ties right into that as well. I mean, I almost fell victim to buying a Le Creuset for just $9.99. I mean, thank goodness I had my wits about me and know what they cost and know that it was bad information. But they had celebrities endorsing Le Creuset pans for a very low price, and people were buying them left and right and getting all their information stolen online with their credit card, their email, everything.
Yeah, along those lines, since you went down the Taylor Swift path, like there were AI generated songs that were
Exactly.
submitted for the Grammys
Oh.
using the fraudulent voices of The Weeknd and Drake, right? Like this is real.
Ah.
The Grammys basically said, "No, you can't do that," right? But it really creates just the swirl of thinking around how do we prevent these things from things like now there's this notion of putting watermarks on AI created content, whether it's images or video, those types of things. But there's also AI that allows us to remove
Right.
those watermarks, or even in Photoshop, right? You can remove watermarks. So now, like a Microsoft, a Google, and an Adobe are thinking about better ways to create these watermarks that may not even be visible to the human eye,
Right.
but the robots and the AI tools and engines can see it, right? So there's technology that's helping us, but we can't always rely on technology. We need to plan for the crisis that may happen.
Well, we really do. And getting there is something that we're going to dive in next, and the importance of really understanding why you should have a written crisis plan in place. And a lot of it, when we are developing crisis communication strategies for our clients, we first start out with the risk assessment. And that is, excuse me, where we take a look and we answer the question, what could happen? And even starting with the 8, those 8 little areas of how we are ethical and reverse engineering what could happen with that is always, I believe, something very important to talk about. And then even taking a look at how the human element could reverse engineer those and go down possibly a negative path based on something that might be happening. Let's talk about some of the risk assessments that you've been involved in, before starting your own firm, which, by the way, you're such a gift to so many people. You were involved in very, very large corporations and some startup corporations as well. What was the landscape of even having a risk assessment discussion on the table?
Yeah, like I said, it wasn't top of mind.
Yeah.
It was mostly about how do we differentiate in the market? How do we be defensible? What markets do we go after? But the notion of thinking about crisis management is probably near the bottom of the list, right?
Right.
The bottom 25% of the list. However, as AI has become more prominent and as AI has been infused in many of the products, it's slowly creeping up to the top, especially as we're hearing more about these fraudulent things that are happening or deep fakes, those types of things, right? But the other thing that I think is propelling it, and I haven't seen a lot of companies doing this yet, is AI could also potentially have impacts on the workforce.
Right.
So whether it's reductions in force, needing to upskill and reskill employees, finding people that have AI skills, and you may not think about that as crisis, but that could be considered crisis because people are nervous, people are afraid, people are almost paralyzed. Some people are paralyzed because of the potential threat of AI replacing them or people that know AI replacing them. And I think that's also one aspect of many of these startups or even larger companies are thinking about, right? Grammarly just recently had a reduction in force, and they were very forthcoming about this being more AI driven or AI influenced their decisions.
Right.
Not many companies are doing that. They're very, very transparent, right? So I think they're trying to get ahead of potential crisis in that aspect. So I think when we think about crisis, we think about like security and deepfakes and all sorts of things, but we also need to think about the human element of this, of, alleviating or at least minimizing fear of people.
Right. And when we're developing a crisis plans, we scale it all out. So what is a 5 would be something horrible that could happen, that no matter what, we pull out no stops, all the stops rather, to really make sure that it's tackled immediately and all the parties know there's a communication tree, so on and so forth. And a 1 might be just trying to get ahead of something that could turn into a crisis if not managed correctly. So there's really the unknown and the known when it comes to management of that and everything else that fits in between. One of the things that I think is really cool about what we're talking about when it comes to risk assessment is the scenario planning as well. And I was involved in a crisis communications plan that we were writing for a client about 15 years ago. And certainly we were discussing technology and cybersecurity and components like that. But we were also discussing a lot of what, some of the sad things about that, what could happen that would cause, the need for an immediate response, such as employee death in the workforce. I mean, so that's where employee death while traveling, just all these sort of things you need to be considering when developing a crisis comms plan. Another scenario was, what if this was a recent program that we worked on a few years ago? What if this major competitor, we're trying to needle them a little bit with some information and strength to release some data points that we own? What if they don't comply? So we had in this situation a green light, and red light that we knew we were going to deploy in the event something happened. So those scenario plannings, although the example I used was very sad, they still need to be included in day-to-day crisis comms. AI, kids doing horrible things with something that is generated on AI that has nothing to do with your brand, and then going and doing something and getting hurt is another scenario that you really need to take into consideration.
Yeah. Lori, the way that you've described it, it's a very analytical process, actually, when we think about scenario planning and risk assessment. And what's interesting about that, Lori, my head automatically goes to AI can actually help with that,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So,
looking at it.
yeah, AI can actually help us with crisis management planning, scenario planning. When you think about red, yellow, greens, my head goes straight to, hey, let's build a heat map, right? For each of these 8 things in the responsible AI principles, what are the scenarios that would be like blue all the way to red, right? And then for each one of those, and it doesn't have to be hard, right? Especially with the help of AI, let's think about what ifs. It's kind of like a decision tree, right? If this happens, then do this. If that happens, do that. And I can pretty much see how AI can help with figuring that out and maybe even doing some calculations to determine, okay, if these combinations of things happen, then these would be the best courses of action, right? Moving forward. The other element of this is just the human side of it, the communications part, right? And I think we oftentimes just think about the mechanical pieces of it, but how do we communicate, right?
Right.
That is just so critical right now, because even in that communication, our people that we've destroyed trust or we've minimized the trust. How do we rebuild? Not just managing the crisis, but building again the loyalty or the trust that was eroded as a result. So
I agree. And you bring up an interesting point here, and then I want to go back to the comms planning on this in just a second. Some of the best communications plans make sure that the crisis never hits the media. It never hits the customer. We've been able to divert it in such a way that nobody knows about it. And of course, there's the ethical side of that. If it is something the customer must know, no matter what, you let them know. But half of it is keeping it out of the media's purview so that it doesn't turn into something that it isn't. So we make sure, and in this scenario that I talked about a few years ago, that was the primary goal. The red light, green light, yellow light approach was, we do not want customers to know about this. We don't want the media to know about it. What can we do to keep it out and just under the table while negotiations are taking place? And by the way, so as I'm reflecting on that and the communication that took place, and going back to communication, the key is having written statements along the way that everyone can live and breathe and know that in the event, okay, we've got to pull the red light, this is what's going to take place, and this is the communication that we will deploy.
love that. Love that, Lori.
Yeah, it's important. So then what we do, and in this situation, we did a lot of training and simulation. So it's all about the what ifs and defining all that as we've talked about, but training and simulation, and even it's almost like media training at this stage. If this happens, we're going to respond to this way. Here are potential questions, and rehearsing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and snippets, right? What do those look like? How will it look like when we talk in social?
Yep.
What would be the talk track for a CEO versus the rest of the leadership team, right? What about our friendlies, our customers? Because they could also be part of this, right? They could actually be advocating for whatever, the mitigation part of it. I am such a proponent of planning,
Yeah.
right? Especially in this world where there are so many unknowns. It's kind of like not having insurance and knowing that things will happen.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy that it hasn't been prioritized. But I think this also comes from, people don't quite understand the risks.
Right. Well, and I love your analogy. We've used it quite often as well as an insurance policy. And a crisis communications plan is an insurance policy to the what ifs and how to approach it when and if it does happen. And again, 69% of businesses out there have experienced a crisis. And I might even go as far as to say that 99% of businesses experienced a crisis during COVID. So although it's reported as 69% post-COVID, everyone was in crisis mode, whether it had been internally or externally during that time on some level. And to be able to plan and make sure that you're set up to succeed or at least communicate correctly during that time period is something that is absolutely vital when it comes to ensuring that your company will be able to open up the door the next day and feel good about what it's done the day before.
Yeah. Back to the insurance analogy. I think in the past, it was more like, okay, I don't really need flood insurance because I'm not on a floodplain. But guess what? Now we are on a floodplain. Right?
Yeah.
In AI, we're now in a floodplain, right? The probability of it happening is higher, not just for internal consequences, employees and things like that, but also externally as the market looks for, as the technology is more accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are technologies out there, let's say the cloud and certain types of, even certain types of AI, like machine learning, deep learning, those predictive analytics. those are not as accessible to the average human being, right? But with generative AI, gosh, you can go chat GPT on Google Bard Gemini now, or Anthropic Claude, right? Or
Ah,
Microsoft Copilot, everybody can use it, right? Even there are free versions out there. So the probability of potential crisis goes up as adoption increases.
yeah, it really does. So we've talked about some of the unethical uses of AI, including deepfakes, disinformation, social media manipulation, impersonation, fraud, some of the general security breaches and data leaks and stuff like that. We've talked about risk assessments and how we might go about approaching how you reverse engineer what could happen, at least answering what could happen. We've talked about great 8 little ideas that you have on how you are ethical, and then reverse engineering those on what people could do that would be unethical. We talked about the crisis management plan, the training and the scenario planning and simulation, rather. So now let's talk about how you build resistance in these, or resilience rather, in these situations, and the tools that you can have at your disposal, AI tools that you have at your disposal to really understand minute by minute if something is happening that you would not necessarily know of without AI. So let's get into some of the new advanced monitoring tools that are out there that are available to companies that they should be subscribing to make sure that they know immediately when something has happened instead of an hour or 24 hours later.
Yeah. So in the tool world and the MarTech stack, we've seen those slides that show like tons of vendors in the MarTech stack, right? Especially in AI right now. So my advice to people is look at your existing tools today. Start there. You have tools that look at social engagements, sentiment analysis, right? That is so critical in just understanding the impact so quickly.
Right.
Because you engage very quickly, you get insights about the market very quickly. So I think that's one of the key tools. The other thing that we need to think about is any kind of predictive analytics that we currently have in our tool set, whether it's being used for campaigns or demand generation. We can begin to see behaviors out in the market, right? What are people searching for? How are they responding to these searches, those types of things? And then we can hopefully predict what might happen
Right.
if something malicious happens as part of a launch or as part of a campaign. The other thing, Lori, is when we do launches, right? What kinds of risks could be out there when we do launches? And right now, it's kind of interesting, the way of the press release. You know how in the past it took us like weeks to prepare for this grand press release with, nice
Oh, yeah.
and everything. And now you could just do like a tweet,
Right.
or the CEO of a company can just do a 60-second or 90-second video announcing a product, right? So how do we actually train the people to do this more seamlessly and do it in a non-harmful way? In the past, I think we had a little bit more control when it comes to PR, right? But now it's literally everybody can launch a product very quickly. And I think there's dangers that we should take into consideration, especially if it's going to result in a crisis, right? Depending on what they say.
Right. And I think everyone's measurement of crisis is very, very different based on all the different criteria that we've talked about. What have you seen in the marketplace regarding the adoption of AI tools to actually create the more immediacy and understanding of if something has happened and knowing about it sooner? How quickly is the market adapting to the adoption of AI tools?
Not from a crisis management perspective,
Right.
right? Especially when it comes to generative AI. People are largely using it for content creation. I think that's the top thing.
Right.
If you think about content creation, data analytics and insights, automation, personalization, and then collaboration and ideation, I would say content creation is the top one. So they might use it to craft maybe the crisis management email or the talk track for the CEO. but it hasn't been used to analyze, for example, what we talked about, the potential risks. It
Exactly.
hasn't been used to develop the what if scenario planning process, right? Nor has it really been used that much in creating ideas for how to mitigate the crisis or creating ideas for how to respond to the crisis. So that would be my guidance to people, right? Make this higher up on the list of priorities and don't be scared of it because we now have AI tools to help us do those things, right?
Oh, yeah. And one of them, I don't know what the technology is, but these people have gotten real tricky and sneaky. So they've got an image that has like a brand logo in it and no hashtags or anything like that, and an actual photograph of the brand. And then the copy it just describes it so that it doesn't necessarily, it's harder to find as a brand that someone is, taking your content and stealing it and promoting a promotion that you don't necessarily own. So the tracking tools that actually see imagery and see words in an image that, you know, typically would be closed from an AI response mechanism is now able, these tools are now able to see that so they can recognize something far sooner, if not never.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what you're describing there, Lori, it's called prompt injection. So they have these images that has maybe a pixel or a prompt built into it, but it's not visible to the human eye, but it's
Right.
visible to the tools like a chat GPT or a Claude, right? And when that image is uploaded, the machines basically see it and it triggers the machine to actually act on it. So it becomes a prompt. So you're ejecting a prompt and you're getting the AI tool to behave in ways that it's not designed to do.
Right.
So that is another aspect of technology that there are other technologies out there that are trying to mitigate that as well.
Yeah. And so I just love everything that we're talking about. And one of the reasons I love it is it really, you can be real creative when it comes to developing a crisis communications plan because you're thinking about all the what if scenarios. What is an example that really made you think, oh my gosh, this could absolutely destroy a company if they didn't catch it soon enough or if it goes any further, that could really help our listeners today understand the importance of crisis comms?
Yeah. So, heaven forbid, none of my clients have gone through this, right? But we now know that with AI, with the tools available to us, with the advancements in innovation, that we will be able to personalize experiences, not just to verticals or functions or personas, but down to the individual level, down to the human being, right? So we will personalize to Lori because we understand you deeply. We know your behaviors, we know your preferences. We will personalize to Liza, and I will get served up content that is relevant to me. Now, in thinking about that strategy, there's a lot of loyalty that we build with customers by providing personalized services and offerings, right? But we have to be super, super mindful of being transparent
Right.
because for us to deliver personalized services, the customer also needs to give us a lot. Permissions to, from anything from medical records, right? To information about your family or information about your travel, those types of things, right? So key things around being transparent around how any of this information will be used is going to be so critical. Again, transparency is one of those 8 things, and I
Right.
think oftentimes forget that AI, for the most part, is a black box to a lot of people, right? You shove it some things, out comes some things, and then you don't know how it happened. And I think it's imperative for companies to really unmask that black box,
Right.
right? What is in that thing? How are you using my information? For what? By when, with whom are you sharing my information? And I think if we can get ahead of that from a transparency perspective, one, we'll have a better experience that we deliver to customers. And then secondly, hopefully we will mitigate some of the concerns around how we're using AI and how it's impacting people.
Yeah. It's just so many insights in that response. and so important to be able to get ahead of it. I love the black box scenario. We talk about that a lot personally as well, right? Like you want to have everything that you need in your black box in the event something happens and be able to just take off and get to a safe area. So why not include it in business as well? I tell you, so many insights today, Liza. Such a fabulous conversation. I really appreciate you're just so wise and you are just so far ahead of the game when it comes to AI. Really appreciate you connecting the dots for us between crisis comms and AI today and all the what ifs and the ethical usage of it. What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. It's Liza Adams. It's Liza. And you can also find me on my website, which is growthpath.net.
Well, I tell you, we appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast. And don't forget to sign up for the StrategyCast newsletter at strategycast.com. Thank you, Liza.
Thank you, Lori. Have a great day.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.